What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video on the channel. Thank you guys all so much for the support. In the three videos that I made yesterday, you guys really seemed to like that Joe Burrow one, and obviously the mock draft seemed to always do well. Let's not forget that we are on the road to 100 subscribers, so please make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and that I'm going to be live streaming the first round of the NFL draft Thursday, April 27th, coming up in a few weeks here. So in this video, we're going to be continuing with the draft content. And I'm going to be doing that up until the actual draft, and even after that, because I gotta milk this cow as much as I can, you guys. Um, but today's video, we're gonna be talking about which positions are the biggest point of need for each NFL team. I'm gonna be going by division, so I'm gonna be going north, south, east, north, south, east, and west. So I'm gonna start with the Bears, and I'm gonna end with the Raiders, NFC to AFC, obviously NFC on top. Um, but let's go ahead and start with the Bears. First of all, guys, I want to say that if you disagree or agree with any of my picks for your specific team, let me know in the comments down below. Let's go ahead and get right into it. All right, the Bears, their biggest need is interior defensive line. Their run defense last year was atrocious. They could not stop the run to save their life. I think that ever since losing Akeem Hicks, losing guys like Khalil Mack, I know he played on the edge, but their defensive line just as a whole has been really bad. Now, in free agency, they did pick up a few edge rushers like Demarcus Walker and a couple other guys who I can't really remember their names right now off the top of my head. So they addressed that somewhat, but they still have nobody at defensive tackle. They need interior defensive line really bad. Perhaps there was maybe a best player in the draft that is slipping down because of character issues that they could take at number 9. Anyway, next we have the Detroit Lions. I think their biggest need is linebacker. I know they brought back Alex Anzalone, but to be honest with you, I don't think he's very good. I think that the Detroit Lions, they're pretty solid at all their other spots. They addressed corner in the draft. They got safety in CJ Gardner Johnson. Um, I I think that their linebackers are their biggest point of emphasis now. And I do want to clarify, this list is not a list of things that I think the team will take first. So I'm not saying that the Lions are going to go linebacker at 6 or 18. I'm saying I think that this is their biggest position of need. So it's not necessarily what they're going to draft. Some cases it definitely is, but in other cases it's just what I think their biggest position of need is. And linebacker, it's not a great linebacker class this year, so I seriously doubt any of them go in the first round. But I can see a team like the Lions taking, a linebacker in the second or third round. All right. Next, we have the Minnesota Vikings. I think their biggest need is defensive back at this point. Their defense last year was really, really bad. Lost Patrick Peterson. Obviously, they got Byron Murphy in free agency, but I just think that they need to bolster up that defensive backfield as much as they can. You really cannot survive in the NFL today if you have lackluster, DBs and lackluster corners, especially. It's just going to make life so hard. So I just think that they need to bolster up the DB. Now, this is an example of a team that I do think will take that with one of their top picks. I do think that they'll go DB at their first round pick. Deontay Banks is a name that I would keep in mind for the Vikings. Green Bay, I think they have a big need at tight end. They lost Robert Tanyan. They lost, Mercedes Lewis. They have a big kind of vacancy at that tight end spot right now. And I think that, especially if you want to see what you have in Jordan Love, you do want to get him a good pass catching tight end. Look for maybe Dalton Kincaid at 13. Maybe if they value Michael Meyer that high, maybe Michael Meyer. Um, there you go. So next, let's go to the New Orleans Saints. I think they need defensive end. They lost Marcus Davenport in free agency to the Vikings. Cameron Jordan, while he's still good, is getting older quickly, and so he could be nearing a sharp decline. And I think that the Saints really like the kind of defense they had a few years ago with that great pass rush. So I think defensive end for the Saints makes the most amount of sense. For the Atlanta Falcons, I am going to go with pass rusher. I think the pass rushers. I think the Falcons, they just need a dominant pass rusher. So, at number 8, look for maybe a guy like Tyree Wilson if he falls. Look for maybe a Miles Murphy. I doubt Will Anderson's there. Maybe they take a flyer on Jalen Carter. Who knows? But I think they need somebody that can go get the pass rusher and go attack the other team's quarterbacks. Next, Carolina Panthers, fairly obvious. They need a quarterback. and they're going to take a quarterback with the first overall pick. Not much to discuss there. It's pretty obvious why they need that. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they need just about everything. The only positional group that I can say that they are rock solid at is probably wide receiver. I mean, they have two really good players, but at the same time, those guys are getting older. Mike Evans is, I think, 31, and Chris Godwin is 28, 29. So they're getting on the older side. So you might want to address that down the road. But as of right now, that's a solid position group. Other than that, I mean, their offensive line is kind of a mess. They have Baker Mayfield at quarterback. Their defensive line is, all old and gone from that Super Bowl year. I guess their linebacking core is still good, but you could use, more safeties and corners. Um, just about everything is probably a need for the Buccaneers, unfortunately. Sorry to do my Bucks fans bogus. For the Dallas Cowboys, I am also going to say tight end, but I'm going to be less specific and say pass catcher. Obviously, losing Dalton Schultz to the Texans in free agency sucks. He was a big part of that offense. He had a lot of volume, and obviously, I think he was kind of a security blanket for Dak. And you look at Dak. Dak had Jason Witten, and then he had Dalton Schultz pretty much in succession. So I think a good tight end is going to be very valuable for the Cowboys. Like I said with the Packers, depending on where Dalton Kincaid goes, depending on where Michael Meyer goes, I can see one of those guys ending up in Dallas. But I think a tight end is very important for the Dallas offense. Now I didn't say wide receiver because they did address Brandon Cooks, so now they at least have another guy who's a short-term answer at receiver, opposite of CeeDee Lamb, obviously. Next, we have the Philadelphia Eagles, and honestly, as a team that literally just went to the Super Bowl and lost by 3 points, they don't have a lot of needs. So I just put down depth slash a playmaker because they do have that 10th overall pick. So I say with the playmaker, you go with kind of best player available at 10, and then 30. You just kind of fill any kind of depth pieces you have. I would think on the defensive line, just because those guys are getting a little bit older, so you could go like a Mozzie Smith, type of thing. But they don't have any real immediate needs like a lot of these other teams do. Um, New York Giants, they need pass catchers. Like they need pass catchers bad. They were in on Odell. They did get Darren Waller in free agency, which I thought was good. However, like having Darius Slayton still as your wide receiver one is not feasible. You gave Daniel Jones all that money. You got to give him some weapons to throw to. And I think that they could go for a wide receiver. Look for, a Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnson if he falls. One of those guys. I really do think the Giants will look for a wide receiver. Washington, I think they need offensive linemen. I could see them wanting to really protect Sam Howell and or Jacoby Brissett, whoever they decide to start, because their offensive line was pretty bad last year. So look for like a Paris Johnson, Darnell Wright, Anton Harrison, et cetera, right? 49ers, I think that they need defensive backs, and I think they need versatile defensive backs. And, it's a pretty good DB class. It's a pretty good corner class specifically. And I believe the Niners don't have a pick until the third round. So they obviously are not going to get one of the top tier guys. But some solid depth at DB. You lost Jimmy Ward in free agency. You lost Mosley in free agency as well. You need guys to, I think, replace that defense. Obviously, the big loss here is, D'Amico Ryan's going to the Texans. So you new D coordinator, you're going to need to give him some new DBs to be as dominant as he was. I like DBs for the 49ers. Arizona Cardinals, they just need defense in general. Their defense is just ass. They lost Byron Murphy, they lost J.J. Watt, they lost Zach Allen. Um, I say specifically pass rushers, but honestly, any kind of defensive help I think is justified. Jonathan Gannon is a defensive guy from Philly. He's going to want to bolster up that defense, so any help on the defense I think is warranted here. You could also say wide receiver because they're probably going to trade D Hop, but it's not nearly as pressing an issue as the defense is, I don't think. Seattle Seahawks, my Seattle Seahawks, they need defensive linemen. They need defensive linemen badly. They were awful against the run last year. They need, I would say they would need an edge rusher that can play the run. But again, would I be upset at a Jalen Carter? Would I be upset at a Kalijah Cansey over at 20? Would I? No. Um, we need defensive linemen. Our defensive line was terrible last year, and it's been pretty bad since the Legion of Boom. I would say, spare for a few games of Jadeveon Clowney. Los Angeles Rams, I think that they need wide receivers, kind of like the 49ers. They don't have a premium pick. They don't have, I don't think, a first or second round pick. Um, so they are not going to get one of the top tier guys, but I think there's a good class for wide receivers as well outside of Cooper Cup. what are the Rams' options at wide receiver right now? They have um, Allen Robinson, who was god awful last year. They have Tutu Atwell, who hasn't really acclimated to the NFL game yet, and they have that other guy, they have Van Jefferson. Um, so I don't know if that really is a good receiving core outside of obviously Cooper Cup. And Cooper Cup, is coming off an injury as well. So I hope that he's the same, but you really never know. So I think receiver would be a big need for the Los Angeles Rams, especially if you want to get Matthew Stafford back to where he was. Um, for Cleveland, you need a defensive end opposite of Miles Garrett. The Browns pass rush outside of Miles Garrett was awful last year. David Clowney didn't do shit. I think Miles Garrett had like 15 sacks, and the next closest Browns pass rusher had like 4. It was bad. It was bad. Pittsburgh Steelers, they need some offensive linemen. Look, they got some nice offensive weapons. They got some nice young guys. They got Kenny Pickett, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Najee Harris. That's great. It's not great though if they can't do anything with the pass rush and the run in their face. Najee Harris last time I felt like he had no holes to run through, and Kenny Pickett, especially Trubisky especially when he was starting early in the year, but Kenny Pickett, it just seemed like he had no time to throw a lot. So, um, Baltimore, they need some defensive linemen. I think with Calais Campbell leaving and Odell signing, that kind of nullifies the need at receiver a little bit. But with Calais Campbell leaving, you have a big hole at defensive line. I look for Lucas Van Ness there at like 21, or I'm sorry, 22 for the Ravens. Cincinnati, they need defensive backs. Jesse Bates left in free agency, and I think their corner room is getting a bit older. I don't love Eli Apple as one of your top tier corners, so any kind of corner safety hybrid I think would be really good for them. Tennessee, they need wide receivers, man. They have nobody. They lost Robert Woods in free agency. Traylon Burks is okay. He's had bright spots, but I think overall has been a little bit inconsistent so far. Get him another pass catcher for Tannehill or Malik Willis or whoever the hell you're gonna have at quarterback next year. Indianapolis, pretty obvious. They're gonna take a quarterback. They're at number 4. Now the question is, do they move up to take one of their top 3 guys, or do they settle for, a Will Levis, whoever their 4th quarterback is on their board? That's the question, but the question of positional need is not a question. It's just quarterback. Jacksonville, I think they need interior offensive line. They want to protect Trevor Lawrence as much as they can, give him time to throw those weapons they've given him, and it might help spring open some holes for Travis Etienne in the run game as well. Houston, again, very obvious. They need a quarterback. They have pick 2. They're going to take a quarterback. Don't need to spend time on that one. Buffalo Bills, I think the Buffalo Bills are going to want to take a wide receiver 2 to pair with Stephon Diggs. I think, a Jordan Addison, a Quentin Johnston, any of those guys could be really good there. Next, New England also needs a wide receiver. Now, I'm going back and forth on if I think New England will take a wide receiver there at 14. Other than Jackson Smith and Jigba, I don't know if any of the receivers here are worth a top 14 pick. Plus, they did already sign Juju. But I do think receiver is still a big need, and you have to see what you have in Mac Jones. Miami, I think they also need a tight end. They do not have a first round pick because of the Tom Brady tampering situation. So, but I do think they need a tight end. They, traded the tight end in the Jalen Ramsey trade, the backup, and then Gesicki went to the Patriots in free agency. So they're kind of without a tight end right now. And I would like to see them get one for Tua. New York Jets, they need offensive linemen. Um, for Aaron Rodgers, they're going to want to protect him. Mekhi Becton, as much as I want to see him back, he has had injury. He's been injury prone so far in his career, so we can't, know for certain that he's going to have a healthy season. Kansas City, the reigning Super Bowl champions, they need wide receivers. They're pretty thin at receiver right now. All they got is MVS, Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore. They just signed Richie James from the Giants, so they're pretty thin at receiver. They don't have a guy. I could see them going with like a Josh Downs there at 31, just to fill kind of a mini position of need. The Los Angeles Chargers, I think, also need a receiver, but they specifically need a speedy wide receiver, one that can stretch the field, one that can, allow Herbert to uncork those absolute piss missiles down the field. Um, I think that they need somebody that can vertically stretch the offense more than their receivers are already doing. Denver, I think they need corners. You might be saying, well, they have a corner. They have Patrick Surtain. Okay, outside of Patrick Surtain last year, I think their corners were very injury prone. They're getting older and or they're just rookies who probably shouldn't be getting that much snaps. I think they need corner depth. They don't have their 5th overall pick due to the Russell Wilson trade, so they can't take one of the premium guys. But I think in the second, third, fourth, fifth round, they could target corner as some depth. Last but not least, the Las Vegas Raiders. I think they need defensive backs outside of Nate Hobbs. I really don't trust their defensive backfield. I think that, especially in a division where you have Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and Russell Wilson, you need to be able to cover receivers down the field. You need to be able to hold up on the back end. And the Raiders so far have not been able to do that. So they'll never, ever compete in that division if they can't do that with those three quarterbacks. So I think that they need defensive back help. What do you guys think of my list? I went through all 32 teams, giving them each their biggest need. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys in tomorrow's video. Peace out.